Hello and welcome to episode 164 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. This episode is sponsored by Rogue Amoeba. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by Sigmund Judge. Sigmund, how's your week going?
My week's going good. It's been exciting for many reasons. Nintendo Switch 2, NAB 2025, which we will get into. Both potentially expensive choices I'm having to make. And also, a bit like Independence Day, that scene with Will Smith where he opens up the spaceship and then punches the alien in the face. That's how I think we felt with Liberation Day this past week.
Liberation Day. Yeah, I guess that's what some people are calling it. Lots and lots of new factors to take into consideration. Lots of economic questions about what's going on in the world. And, you know, we're not an economic podcast, but it does impact tech and Apple TV and the world that we talk about. So, yeah, lots of things up in the air. We're keeping an eye on them. I'm not exactly sure how that's all going to go, but I think things could be getting more expensive for me in the very near future.
That said, Nintendo Switch 2, really excited for this new console from Nintendo. Super Mario Kart World looks absolutely incredible. I have to admit, I've not been a Nintendo gamer for quite a while. Occasionally I have little stints of Pokemon and that kind of thing. Nothing ever really seems to keep my attention when it comes to gaming these days. But I think Super Mario Kart World may just do that. Are you tempted by a games console, or is everything these days happening for you through Apple Arcade?
Practically everything's happening through Apple Arcade, but I'm absolutely tempted by the Switch 2. I mean, I've had my Switch 1 pretty much since it came out. That thing has lasted forever, and it hasn't been played quite as much the past couple of years, but that doesn't mean that I don't love the thing and wish I played it more. And I have to imagine video game playing in my family is going to come back around before too long as my son gets older. So if the Switch 2 sticks around as long as the Switch has, it's definitely going to be the one in our household that's going to be there as he's growing up, because we are a Nintendo household. I grew up on the N64, and I've been a Nintendo diehard ever since then. So really excited about the Switch 2. So far, kind of sitting it out. Of course, pre-orders aren't even live in the U.S. yet. Lots of questions again about how that's going to go. But I don't know that I'm going to be a launch day adopter, but I do imagine there'll be one in my house before too long, especially as, again, video games become more a part of our household as Noah gets older.
I'm kind of the same in the sense that the thing that's really pulling me in at the moment, and it is old hat by other gaming standards, is the online aspect. I think Nintendo are doing the online aspect in an interesting way, which I think is probably the closest to, I guess, the early days of online, where we were transitioning from, couch co-op to being social online. I've got a PlayStation 5. No one talks online, hardly ever. And with everything so upfront and in your face, including, 10 frames per second video feeds of what your friends are playing, I like that aspect of it. And I gotta say, Brendan, John, and Federico got me very excited with this week's NPC podcast, talking all about it. And yeah, super exciting. That said, it's been an exciting week for other reasons. And, well, a couple of them we're going to talk about this week.
We are. We've got a lot to discuss on this week's episode. I'm excited to dive into all of it. We're going to talk about a competitor to HDMI coming from China. We're going to cover news from NAB 2025 in Vegas, including a pivotal shift for Apple Immersive Video and new details about Blackmagic's upcoming Ursa Cine immersive camera and its post-production tools. We've got our immersive recap of VIP Yankee Stadium. But let's start this week with our highlight of Apple original drama, Your Friends and Neighbors.
After being fired in disgrace, Andrew Cooper, a hedge fund manager still grappling with his recent divorce, resorts to stealing from his neighbours' homes in the exceedingly affluent Westmont village, only to discover that the secrets and affairs hidden behind those wealthy facades may be more dangerous than he ever imagined.
How are the kids?
They're fine.
Wife?
Ex-wife.
I gotta deliver some bad news. You're fired.
What? I just need to know how long I can float on what I got. 6 months.
Rich guy loses his job, turns to petty crime. That's stupidity.
Maybe it's just desperation.
It was your job to fight for Mom, for us.
How did everything go so wrong so fast?
This comes to us from Apple Studios, and Tropper Inc. is created, directed and executive produced by Jonathan Tropper as part of his overall deal with Apple TV Plus, and stars Jon Hamm, Amanda Peet, Olivia Munn, Mark Tallman, Lena Hall, Amy Carrero, Eunice Bay, Isabella Marie Gravett, Donovan Colon, and Hoon Lee, who last worked with Jonathan Tropper on the incredible HBO series Banshee. It follows a former hedge fund manager who loses everything, his wife, his kids, the family home, and his job. But with bills climbing and a 2-year bar from working, he has to find a way to survive. And that's by stealing from his former friends and associates in the midst of this journey, with Jon Hamm's Andrew Cooper looking to also find himself and reconnect with elements of his life that he'd left long, long behind. We've been hearing about this one for a long time as it was coming together, Devon, and the show even got a second season renewal before its premiere, so expectations are high. Off the bat, I've got to tell you, this show pulled me in with its first 2 premiere episodes debuting on Friday. What were your first impressions of your friends and neighbours?
I liked it a lot too. I agree with you. It did really pull me in. I have to say, based on the premise and even the trailer, I thought it would be a little bit funnier than it was. Maybe I was just coming in with the wrong expectations. I didn't laugh a ton, but that's not really what this show's about, I don't think. And I kind of got that vibe pretty quickly, which is fine. I think this is less of a ha-ha funny kind of show and maybe a little bit more subtle in its humor. But it is really well done and a show that I definitely got sucked into very quickly. The other thing I didn't really expect was that I'd feel bad for Coop. Based on the premise. I kind of thought he'd be more of a caricature kind of guy. Like, you know, we've heard this story before. The guy who loses his family, loses his job, is in economic straits. And maybe it's some of my like real world bias that I thought there might be something kind of satisfying in seeing that story play out on screen. And that's not at all what I got out of this. I actually really do feel bad for the guy. The way this whole thing is set up and even the way that he loses his job, it is convoluted in a sense about, you know, power dynamics and things like that. But you do feel bad for the guy because it feels like someone is out to get him, not necessarily anything that he's done himself. So I think that was the thing that most surprised me about it, was that I actually feel sympathetic for the main character, which of course is a good thing for a TV show. He's not an anti-hero like I was expecting. He's actually someone that I would like to see good things happen to. And so that's got me invested in the show going forward.
Yeah, and he's someone that I think is far more nuanced than the synopsis of the show would let you in knowing. Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely think there's a lot to discover. And what I like about what they're doing with the character and how the character is written, you can already see within the first couple of episodes that there are things that he is reconnecting with. We get this backstory early on of how he kind of led to this point of success or perceived success. And I think it's done through a really, really interesting way. I would say for a lot of people, because this show relies a lot on the inner monologue of Jon Hamm's character, similar to Physical in some ways, would you say?
Yeah, I think that's true. It's even got a similar structure in that it's starting at one place and then kind of backing up to show us how he ended up there. And it's all very much through his lens and the way he processes the situation that he's in. So I could definitely see it being a Physical style show in that way. I think it kind of connects with me on that same level as well.
Do you think this is a fitting role for Jon Hamm? You know, he is the darling of Hollywood these days. But there was a time in the early 20-teens where he didn't necessarily have the clean-cut image that he now has within the industry.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been looking forward to. Of course, the whole Everyone But Jon Hamm thing, and then he appeared on the morning show, so feels like a natural progression. I feel like in terms of the role, it feels like something that audiences are going to be sort of familiar with in terms of, the businessman and going back to his roots and how he got big. And I feel like this is very much in his wheelhouse in that sense. But I do think, like you said, with kind of his image and the way he's perceived in Hollywood, he just brings a natural likability to this character that maybe another actor wouldn't necessarily. And I think it is written in there for Cooper, but at the same time, I think part of my affinity for him is that I still see Jon Hamm. He is very much being himself as he's playing Cooper here. And so to me, maybe some of my positive feelings are transferring that way, and I think a lot of people are going to experience that. At the same time, I do feel like he is pushing himself a little bit in this role. Even at the beginning of the series, there's a lot of contention with age and aging and what life looks like at different phases of life. And that comes for all of us, right? That's something we have to each contend with. And it feels like this is an opportunity for Jon Hamm to kind of play someone who's going through that in a way that he hasn't before and see him working through that on screen. So I think it's a progression for him, but familiar enough that people are not going to feel off-put in any way. If you've seen him in the morning show, if you've seen him on Mad Men, this is more great Jon Hamm goodness, and you're going to enjoy it.
Now, beyond Jon Hamm and Cooper, this world in which Your Friends and Neighbours is set, it's an extremely affluent world, huge homes, nice cars, fancy jobs. Do you think audiences will have trouble connecting with that setting? Because initially I thought that would be the case, but as more of Cooper's inner monologue comes in, I feel like that's what I'm connecting to rather than the setting itself. There's this kind of eat the rich vibe curtailing throughout the whole show.
Yeah, it kind of flips the whole setting on its head, right? Almost a little bit like Palm Royale, but from a different angle. Whereas, in that show, someone's really trying to get into it. Now we see someone who has integrated themselves into it, but is suddenly forced to have an outsider perspective. I think that's an interesting way of doing it. So certainly not a world I'm familiar with, but I think it's one that, it's cool to see portrayed on screen, not in a way that you're striving for it, but almost in you're feeling bad for these people and the way they live their lives. They have all these things, but then you hear them talk to each other, and it's just like, how do you think that way and communicate that way? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But I think it also humanizes Cooper in a way, because he is suddenly an outsider in this world that he strives so hard to get into. And so you do feel bad for him, but you also feel like, okay, good for you. You have an opportunity to move beyond this shallow world that you strive so hard to be in. And this is an opportunity to do something different with your life. And so it's a really interesting setting. I think what they do with it makes it approachable and compelling, and in a way that, again, I think it just makes you relate to him even more. And I think it also makes you feel less conflicted when he starts committing the crimes to keep up his lifestyle, because you already don't like the people that he's robbing. And so it's like, you know what? It's probably okay if that person has a little bit less so he can keep up his lifestyle maybe.
Yeah, and I think the crime aspect of this makes things a little bit easier as well, right? Because you are a voyeur in that sense, watching someone do something they're not expected to do, and therefore getting away with a lot because everyone feels so kind of secure within their bubble, and that bubble is obviously broken for Cooper. In terms of the crime aspect, it doesn't come in until the very end of the first episode. Did it seem a little out of the blue, and does that eat the rich sentiment extend beyond the show's lead character?
I think it does. I think it starts to grow throughout the series. I mean, we see more elements of it beyond the first episode, but I feel like that transition from getting to meet Cooper, seeing the situation that he's in, and then that turn to, I'm going to turn to a life of crime. I'm going to be a cat burglar to pay my bills. To me, that seemed really sudden. There were kind of hints of it throughout the episode, but I wish maybe they had used a little bit more of that inner monologue to make that transition a little bit smoother for us personally. To me, what the caper element really does is kind of break up what I was getting from the show, which was just how depressing Cooper's life is. And it adds, in a sense, it's kind of twisted, but in a sense, it does add a bit of like fun and risk to his life that's become very mundane and drab and sad.
Yeah, and I think, there's one party right at the beginning in the first episode which leads to his first taste of cat burglary whilst the party's going on. Obviously, it's alcohol-fueled. I'm not sure if I would call this, though, a depressing life. For me, I get maybe the show can be deemed as a little bit depressing, at least to begin with. And I think that's maybe due to the dry delivery of Jon Hamm's inner monologue. That's probably what made you feel that way. I don't know. Personally, I love the cynical tone. And maybe because of recent real-world events, it sounded like something that derived from a lot of sentiment following the 2008 housing crash, which I'm kind of bracing myself for more of following recent events. Personally, loved Cooper's kind of 1-2 jabs out of nowhere to the people that did him wrong, and the people that are on the receiving end know they did them wrong, and so they don't retort. And then I also love how that extends to his ex-wife, to his daughter, who's played by Isabel Gravitt, amazing, and of course Amanda Peet, who we get to explore a lot more of, what she gave up and some doubts there. So there's a lot of different character arcs going on. That said, with so many highlights due to the brilliant writing throughout, which has enabled these great performances from Donovan Colan, Olivia Munn, and Lena Hall, who may just be my personal highlight so far 2 episodes in, there has been a lot of discussion about what Apple's next big hit show will be now that Severance is off the air. The studio is up there, whilst Dope Thief is a limited series. As we said from the top, Your Friends and Neighbours already renewed for a 2nd season. And whilst both of those shows offer something completely different, as far as mainstream audience goes, do you think this could be the next to steal viewers' eyeballs, hearts, and minds? And of course, I use that word "still" purposefully.
I think it has some potential to do that. I think it's hard to follow up a series like Severance that's just so big and caught so many people's attention. And like you said, there is the studio for film lovers. There is Dope Thief. But of all the follow-ups to Severance, I feel like this one is the one that has the most potential to get a wider audience. Again, you think about a show like Mad Men, which is a very different series, but I feel like there's elements here, including, of course, Jon Hamm himself, of that really could draw people in. And the fact that the show already has a future, which means it's ongoing, people can invest in it. I feel like as people start to see this one and talk about it and get some word of mouth going, this really could be the next big one. Is it going to reach Severance highs? I don't know. Severance is such an aberration and such a unique show that, you're always chasing the next big thing. But I feel like this has that potential to catch more eyes in a way that I feel like if I were doing the schedule for Apple TV Plus, I think this timing makes a lot of sense as a follow-up to Severance and trying to keep that audience engaged.
I don't know if this is just me being lazy, because Jon Hamm, of course, had a role in the morning shows last season. And we're waiting for more morning show to come upon us later this year, I'd imagine. This did have a very kind of the morning show vibe in a lot of ways when you're away from the studio. There's a lot at play here with regard to power dynamics in the workplace, which initially we think is what's going to get him into trouble. There's another element to this series that I think is teased very, very early on, but I don't know for sure, which could involve the police. So I think this is going to be really, really interesting. I think in some ways, there's some high stakes here. You know, someone that you don't expect to be doing something that they are. A bit like it, and I say it again, Breaking Bad, right? A professor who turns drug dealer. We've got a hedge fund manager now turning to cat burglar. There are, in some ways, some very interesting elements that can be explored in this. And yeah, very, very impressed with the first 2 episodes of Your Friends and Neighbours, debuting this Friday across all of your screens on Apple TV+. And, well, this is one that we're going to definitely be checking in on from time to time throughout the first season. Now, if you were in a similar position, I guess my question would be, who and where would you burgle first?
Well, I feel bad even pretend burgling somebody because, you know, it's just not really me. But if I were in that position and I absolutely had to, the more I hear about the late Karl Lagerfeld's estate and all the amazing iPods that he had, of course, again, I would feel terrible doing this, but there's so many cool iPods in there. I feel like I could make some good money, but also find some really cool stuff. So maybe I'd go there first. What about you?
I love it. It's almost like we're having a moment very similar to Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring, where they used to do that. And I love this kind of element of storytelling that happens every now and then. But for me, it's going to be Grant Petty's house. Now, only probably to borrow something for a short time. For those that are unaware of that name, Grant Petty is, in my opinion, the Steve Jobs of the camera and film world, with such an inspirational story that in parts actually mirror that of the late Apple founder. And so there's good reason why so much of our NAB talk this year is centered around his presentation of everything coming from Blackmagic Design in 2025, leading to some very exciting news for Apple Immersive Video and the company's upcoming first ever immersive cinema camera called the Blackmagic Ursa Cine Immersive. But before that, Grant Petty gave us an assured 3-hour presentation that included reveals for additions to the company's broadcast hardware and new software enhancements. And we wanted to cover the parts that best pertain to Apple users and budding filmmakers. Where do we want to start?
I think we should start with the camera closest to home, the one that we carry in our pockets. For a lot of budding filmmakers, that's what they start with, but there's tools from Blackmagic there as well. So what's new for the Blackmagic camera app for iOS?
Well, I think, first off, free app in the App Store. It's incredible. It's had so many updates, and not only can you use the iOS app on iPads to monitor your other cameras that are iPhones and have a whole setup without a Blackmagic camera, but you can also use iOS as a monitor for Blackmagic cameras as well, which we've talked about when it came to focus pulling and using Apple Vision Pro for focus pulling. There's something that I think we've seen from a couple of competitors before, but this is pretty new with regard to Blackmagic, and I think the quality and the additional things that you're able to do with it. And that is the addition of a new integration for iPhone and iPad, with live feeds from guests being able to be delivered over the internet all the way to a 2ME or to an 8M switcher. Also offering the ability to have a full quality feed be delivered from any location in the world to a production environment. So if you've got a guest, for example, or if you're trying to get a live feed in from a reporter, you literally give them a link that they copy and paste in, and then whatever they are capturing goes direct to the Blackmagic cloud. And that also means that for some productions, they're able to edit and replay that footage as it's being pumped in from that person's location. So very, very cool stuff. Very exciting for me especially because I've always wanted a way of being able to bring the camera feed from the Blackmagic camera app to an ATEM switcher. They are these kind of big keyboard looking things where you're able to plug in loads of HDMI devices and then have the individual recordings of all of them. Really, really special. As I said, I've owned a Blackmagic 8M Extreme ISO for a long time, but really only ever got to use it as a multi-source HDMI capture device before now. And whilst they also introduced a new version of that hardware, they also announced virtual cloud-based devices that can be hired on a job-by-job basis, which is very, very cool. I don't know how usable it is right now, but really, really impressive. And one of the big reasons that I've never really been able to use the ATEM hardware to its full potential is the fact that I haven't owned Blackmagic cameras, because there are still benefits to using the cameras over the apps, right? One of them being that these cameras can be remotely controlled, and because Blackmagic cameras have been broadcast focused mainly, where you have a big team, including someone that pulls focus manually, it's not really been viable to invest fully into the system as a solo shooter. That's mainly due to the fact that the Blackmagic cameras have always been lacking the ability to continually focus on its subject, Devon. And one of the hilarious things about this was just the nonchalant way in which 2 hours into this presentation, Grant Petty said, "Oh, we've been working on continuous autofocus on our cameras, and it's a nice update." And then he kind of demoed it, working almost flawlessly. And, well, really, really impressive. And I think for anyone that's used the Blackmagic camera app on iOS, they'll note how, whilst it's a lot more complex than the standalone camera app on iOS, it's far less complex than a lot of UIs if you've ever picked up a proper camera, right? And that UI is very much repeated on the Blackmagic cameras. And what I loved about this demo for continuous autofocus coming to these cinema cameras, which are at a budget that a lot of people can invest in and can afford. Most of the cameras, we'll get there. What was interesting to me was how the autofocus was implemented. So, for example, a blue square indicates when the subject is in focus, whilst orange indicates if the camera is struggling to latch on, and red indicates very clearly when the subject is out of focus. This all kind of sounds old hat for a typical iPhone shooter, I'm sure, but something that is hinted in the public beta for this feature is the addition of numbers above the blue box when you're in focus. So you can have a number of subjects, and users are able to choose a primary and secondary subject to latch focus onto. And the mystery has kind of been why. Now, for those with the Blackmagic app on iPhone, you'll notice that there is an option for output called Blackmagic RAW, which doesn't work in Final Cut but does work in DaVinci Resolve, Blackmagic Design's studio for editing. What it has baked into this proprietary format is a number of things within the metadata, including, for example, gyro, which is something that Sony and Canon and other competitors do as well. But what was hinted to me earlier this week when I spoke with Blackmagic was that the data now includes something else. And I asked straight up to the Blackmagic representative that I spoke with if this was something that was coming, and I was told, you might be onto something and to stay tuned. But do you remember when Apple introduced cinematic mode on iPhone? Was it a few years ago?
Yeah, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. Yep.
Yeah, and one of the features of that was allowing filmmakers to edit within the Photos app and then, after the fact, change the subject of focus, which I thought was kind of mind-blowing.
It really is a cool mode that I wish I used more. I need to spend more time in cinematic mode because it's great being able, after the fact, to choose what you want in focus and do that rack focus as needed. And it's felt like a really unique feature of the iPhone for a long time. There's been other cameras that have done it, but none that I think have been really mainstream other than the iPhone that's had that capability so far.
Yeah, and, well, I think the same thing is coming to Blackmagic cameras. And, you know, you often hear of partnerships between Blackmagic and Apple, and you wonder, okay, well, how does it work? Is it all just one way and money gets pumped in from Apple for investment, or is there like a trade, right, in regards to technology? And whilst I don't know for sure, it feels like there is some kind of trade-off going here. And I think what's the most amazing about this autofocus and continuous autofocus coming to Blackmagic cameras is that they showed off this autofocus mode on not the most expensive camera that they're first releasing, but one from 2023, the Blackmagic 6K full frame cinema camera. And it is a technical marvel in its own right, but of course that one thing that was missing was continuous autofocus. And right now, people that own that camera, the L-mount variant of that camera, can download the public beta and test it out. So it's there for people to check out. So I was pretty blown away, to be honest with you. And all we know so far is that the phase detect based continuous autofocus system, which also has an AI layer, is planned for more Blackmagic Design camera systems, but there's still a lot of engineering work and lens compatibility tests to go for their other 6K, 12K, and 17K cinema cameras, Devon.
I'm just imagining getting an email from the maker of my camera and saying, oh, by the way, if you download the software update, now you have autofocus just included. Like,
Yep.
They could have easily tied that to hardware, and it's really incredible and generous on their part to get that out there. But so many amazing software updates with this. The cloud stuff is very exciting. I use an ATEM switcher at work, so I'm going to definitely look into the integration with the Blackmagic camera app on my iPhone and see how I can integrate that. That's all super exciting. Of course, the other side of the software story is editing as well, which Blackmagic offered DaVinci Resolve, which is hitting version 20, as it was announced this week. And of course, that's really one of the main competitors to Apple's own Final Cut Pro in many ways. So what was announced there for DaVinci Resolve?
I mean, what wasn't announced? Lots of AI-driven tools to cut out the laborious parts of content creation and filmmaking. And, you know, AI has kind of had a bit of a hit in regard to its reputation, you know, especially with the generative stuff and the stuff that we don't really need and we feel is probably a threat to jobs and, most importantly, people's sanity, I would say, alongside intellectual property. But the AI tools, and there were loads of them that were announced. We've got IntelliScript, which sees you upload a script of a narrative script that you just shot, and the AI will sort out the best takes with alternate takes positioned on top in the timeline so that you can easily replace it should you need to. There's a music editor that will adjust the song length, and AI will listen to the song and make the appropriate cuts, which, if you've had any experience of editing, you want to kind of cut to the beat of the music. Now, my understanding is it can be the other way around in that regard, so that's kind of cool. Then you've got from an audio perspective, Audio Assistant, which essentially goes through all of the audio tracks, organizes and then labels them. There's a voice convert tool, which uses AI to change someone's voice. So if you wanted them to sound more British or more American, you could, or in the case of the recent Brutalist film, you could refine the Hungarian dialogue. This can do that. You can also import dialogue that matches a take ruined by background noise, and AI will analyze and then replace the original vocal element of the initial take with new dialogue created from the imported dialogue file. Then you've got dialogue matching, and this is a little bit like color matching. So it'll find one clip that has maybe more reverb, for example, and kind of takes on the traits of the acoustic elements within that scene, and then another that was recorded in the studio, and it will add the desired audio characteristics to match both audios together, which is mind-boggling. I have no idea how you even begin to think of how to do this kind of stuff. You've got super scaling, which enhances the resolution by 2, 3, or 4 times, which is very, very cool. And I think there is an argument in the sense of, okay, do I need a 12K or a 17K camera, or could I just upscale everything and save myself some money? That is a question that I'm sure will be asked again and again and again over the coming years. Set extender, which is basically image extending with generative AI, but for video, Devon. And this is just mind-blowing to me as someone that has worked a lot with images and extending them for our chapter artwork and sometimes for the artwork of our podcast episodes. Then you've got Magic Mask, which allows you to select an object and then it will track that object throughout the scene. There's an EQ and level matcher, and if that wasn't enough, there's the small inclusion of a new immersive video output setting, along with lots and lots of tools for Apple Immersive Video.
Well, this all sounds super exciting. I could definitely see how, even in my workflows, I could take advantage of some of this stuff. The organization's just amazing. Being able to match different audio clips, that's something I've done manually, and it is a pain. So being able to pick the one that you want the others to sound like, and it just kind of does it, that's incredible. And set extender, that makes me think of when older shows go to streaming and they try to take them from 4:3 to 16:9. Sometimes that can go really, really wrong, but they could just throw it through here and get it in the right shape without having to go back and re-edit everything, which would be cool.
Oh, don't give the studios ideas like that. Don't.
Yeah, you're right. I'd rather just watch it in 4:3, but if you must, do this rather than what they're currently doing, which is kind of a mess. But of course, we want to talk more about the immersive video aspect of things. You talked about the software in DaVinci Resolve, but that brings us to Blackmagic's first commercially available camera designed specifically for Apple Immersive Video. Of course, that's the Blackmagic Ursa Cine Immersive. We talked before about the specs, and it was recently shown off at South by Southwest. But tell me, what's new in terms of this groundbreaking camera?
Well, this is one of the main reasons that I got to talk to Blackmagic earlier this week, and, well, we do have more details. First off, the Blackmagic Design Ursa Cine Immersive comes with 2 times 12K sensors, same as the Ursa 12K LF, and the newly announced Pixis 12K, which I'm very, very tempted with, just under $5,000, at least for Europeans and everyone outside of the US. But it's taking these lenses and bringing them to a new camera with new internals, specific for immersive video. That camera and the computing is different because it's having to do like pixel level synchronization for the custom 180 degree plus lenses, with each camera custom calibrated with the metadata then living within the B-raw video that it outputs and making sure that everything is in sync. So everything is individually calibrated, and there is some work that has to be done in post, say, if you had more than one of these immersive cameras, which I could only dream of having one, let alone 3. But I'd imagine for live concerts, that kind of thing, we're going to see those kind of setups. The lenses have an interpupillary distance based off of the global average width between a human being's 2 pupils. That's around 64 millimeters. And that also means the lenses and irises are fixed in place as well, meaning that the only control for exposure comes via shutter angle, via ISO, and via ND filters, which are built in and offer 2, 4, and 6 stops of diffusion. The video is set to 90 frames per second, the minimum frame rate spec Apple want for Apple Immersive Video on Apple Vision Pro, which is interesting, and that's new knowledge for us. The native resolution of this camera, Devon, 8160 by 7200. And, well, I want to play a game. How much do you think 8 terabytes is going to get you in terms of immersive video footage?
Let's see. The camera comes with 8 terabytes, and being on a film set, you want some time to film footage. You don't want to run out quickly and have to change out the modules all the time. I'm just going to guess 8 terabytes, let's say 4 hours.
Well, I mean, it would be nice, but what you actually get is roughly 1 hour, 38 minutes of footage. And that is based roughly on 1.1 gigabytes a second. So you're going to need a 10 gig equipped network, I think, as a must, really, for this kind of setup. I mean, things could get a lot worse because this is actually based on a 12:1 compression, 8K per eye. So potentially you could go even further and, eat through your terabytes of storage very, very quickly. The nice thing, though, about these media units is that they're hot swappable. If you've got a number of them and one comes with the camera, you're probably going to be okay. You're probably going to need a NAS as well for this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I'm just imagining the poor PAs whose job it is to plug in those 8 terabyte modules and transfer them to where they're actually going to end up, because that's got to be a brutal job. But, as video progresses, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, so these numbers are just going to get wilder and wilder. And, that's pretty incredible, 1.1 gigabyte per second, but that just shows the fidelity of what we're working with.
Yeah, and we'll get there, but the camera also includes both SDI and 10 gigabyte Ethernet out, as well as a side view monitor and a flippy screen as well. So, which is really, really cool because both of them sport a near identical UI to that seen recently in the behind the scenes footage of numerous Apple Immersive Video productions, including some fan footage that I was able to find of the cameras from that Metallica concert in Mexico City. Both displays also act as controls, so you've got the ability to switch between eyes to make sure that both lenses are dirt free, because obviously one of them's got a little bit of dirt on, it's going to ruin the experience. The overall display, though, it represents a fisheye of the 180 degree plus that's being captured, with an easy push of a button allowing you to punch into what the view would be when wearing the headset. And over the fisheye is a traditional box preview in the center to help roughly guide with framing up the shot and aligning the subject. So I think this is really, really cool. I've got a funny feeling that the software side of things is what has been used on the cameras for Apple and Apple Immersive Video that we've seen so far. Audio is interesting because the system includes 2 onboard mics for stereo plus 2 XLR inputs, so there's no spatial audio capture handled on the camera itself. That's going to have to be handled by a number of available third-party devices, and they can actually be fairly simple. I watched the coverage of NAB from office hours with Alex Lindsay, and they were showing off how they're capturing spatial audio whilst walking the NAB floor, and it was so well done and it sounded amazing. So I know that there are simple ways in which to do this. There's also an RS connection for remotely triggering recording and other functions. And well, that's it for the camera specifically. What was interesting to me was that during these demos and what was shown, I've got an Apple Vision Pro developer strap in its box still, waiting for this moment. And it does appear as though we're not going to actually need that to use. You know, unlike what was shown in the Submerged behind the scenes, which was the main reason why I picked one up, it does look like we're going down a different route, at least when it comes to editing and the post-production flow. It'll be interesting during the filming, but everything was being done wirelessly at NAB from Blackmagic. Shall we get into some post-production workflow details?
Yeah, I'm really interested to know how these are being edited and organized and distributed and previewed, because there's a lot of questions about, this is a very new format, non-traditional, how exactly all that works and what that's going to look like. And I'm sure Blackmagic has some solutions for us. So what have they got?
Well, they've got a workspace, which again is really easy. There's like a couple of button clicks from the main menu, and it allows you to stream to Vision OS, which, well, we know how they're doing that now. We'll get to that at the end of this segment, but you can also simultaneously see on a display as well as stream to Vision OS. So Vision OS, you're going to see the whole thing, right? The display can either display the fisheye 180 degree or the box view, with the ability to switch to 3D panel and switch eyes as well, left, right, or top and bottom previews. So lots of options there. In terms of color grading, it's treated very much like your traditional video. So color grading can be achieved with color managed mode, but you can also use the node-based workflow within DaVinci Resolve. In the future, you'll be able to map window space for the 180 degree format. But for now, what's being demoed are lots of VFX options, including feathering, which is used to control the edges of a light source to create a softer, more gradual transition between light and shadow, so there isn't that harsh cutoff that we have seen in some immersive videos so far. And overall, the video currently being delivered via a new preset in DaVinci Resolve 20 is the H.265 format based MVHVC file using encoding profile main 10, and even better still, it seems as though the M4 iPad Pro can handle these files based on what's being shown on the floor. Now, once you start adding layers and effects, things may vary, but for the most part, it seems the initial expense of the camera itself, which was initially coming in at $30,000, it doesn't look like it's going to require a complete overhaul of your post-production hardware. So I don't think there's any worries of having to, jump to a Mac Pro to make this all work. One thing that's missing a little bit from this week, normally when Blackmagic's new cameras are being shown, so are the sensors being shown off. Now, there is a gallery available with footage showing off the individual sensor of the 12K Cine, but nothing for the Cine Immersive yet. And I'd imagine they didn't get that ready in time because they didn't think there was going to be a way of being able to distribute that to potential customers and just people that are really interested in this format, and especially Apple Vision Pro users. That has changed, and we will get there, but I had a couple of friends actually check out this demo on the show floor at NAB in Vegas, and what they've told me is that chromatic aberration is almost imperceivable from this camera. There's no purple fringe effect. There's still some flaring, but it's very minor when it comes to light sources. And the demo material has been described as a step up from what's currently being delivered on Apple Vision Pro to the public with recent releases. That may simply be a compression issue, because I'm pretty sure it's just raw files that are being demoed compared to what Apple have to deliver. But yeah, really, really impressive.
Yeah, and it's encouraging to me to know that at the very least, it's on par with what we're seeing from Apple Immersive Video currently, because of course Apple's been using a custom camera for all those productions. And so knowing that what's going to be available for purchase from Blackmagic is going to be on that same level, they're not going to be making any compromises in terms of the video quality, that's really encouraging to me. So we're not going to be watching Apple Immersive videos later and being able to tell very clearly, okay, this one was shot with this and this one was shot with this. Now, as the format diversifies over time, eventually we'll have some of that stylistic kind of stuff, but in terms of quality, it'll be just as enjoyable either way.
Yeah. I'm really, really excited to get hands-on with this camera and learn. Every time an Apple Immersive videos come out, I've been taking notes on the shots being used, what works and what doesn't work so well. We'll leave that for later. But yeah, really, really impressive. And I'd imagine this camera is going to start landing in people's hands. And so we're going to be able to see a diversifying of what we can see in terms of the different content in Apple Immersive Video. I'm really, really excited to see what comes from the horror crowd and how long I can actually bear keeping that Apple Vision Pro on my head.
Yeah, you talk about the diversity of footage we're going to be seeing soon, different types of films, and I'll let you test the horror ones first and tell me if it's something that I can even try, because that's a whole other level. But we at least know one way that this video is going to be distributed and viewed going forward, and that is the new Immersive Video Utility app that Apple released this week for Mac and Apple Vision Pro. It allows users to import, organize, package, and review Apple Immersive Video on Mac, share Apple Immersive videos, inspect and modify metadata, and stream video to multiple Apple Vision Pro devices, including synchronization for large groups, which in itself could tackle an issue for wealthy households where you've got multiple Vision Pros you want to watch together. Well, here you go. We'll link the app in the show notes. It's going to be interesting to see how this gets used exactly, what's being distributed that way, but it's cool to know that this option is out there. And overall, it's just a very exciting time ahead for Apple Immersive Video.
This week's episode is sponsored by Rogue Amoeba, makers of incredibly useful audio tools for your Mac. You can learn all about their apps at macaudio.com/macstories. Take Soundforce, for example, which gives you amazing control over audio. You can use it to apply audio effects and volume control to every app on your Mac. You can also redirect any app's audio to different output. With their flagship product, Audio Hijack, you can hijack or record any audio on your Mac. So even the Apple TV app, which is what we do for this very show, and so much more. You can bring your microphone and apps together into a powerful virtual audio device using Loopback, perfect for audio and video chats, just like our podcasts, but also great for live streaming and lots of other applications. And on their soundboard app, Farrago, you'll have audio clips at your fingertips, ready for playback at a moment's notice. All of Rogue Amoeba's apps are available as fully functional free trials right from their site, and with recent updates, you can now get started in seconds with no restarts, no extensions, and no system settings changes. Best of all, through the end of April, you can save 20% off your purchase. Just enter coupon code MS2504 at checkout. That's MS2504. Visit macaudio.com/macstories to get started. And once again, we thank Rogue Amoeba for powering our audio needs on the Mac and sponsoring the show.
Our thanks to Rogue Amoeba. Now, moving from routing audio to routing audio, video, data, and power, HDMI has a potential competitor coming out of China that goes vroom. Sigmund, tell us about this one.
I mean, because it's called GPMI, right? Vroom. I love it. This is a new standard backed by TCL, Huawei, and Hisense, and it was unveiled this week. It's described as an innovative achievement and a core technological breakthrough in the audio and video industry, and integrates the functions of video transmission, data interaction, network connection, and power supply, realizing one interface to support the full business needs of audio and video, plus data, plus network, plus control, plus power supply. Very, very cool. It's going to be interesting to know, if this can actually take off. But from a spec point of view, this is actually really, really interesting. GPMI will be available both with USB Type-C connection and a new larger Type-B connector. And this new standard is going to deliver up to 96 gigabytes per second over USB Type-C and up to 192 gigabytes per second over the dedicated Type-B connector. It also supports power delivery of up to 240 watts and 480 watts respectively, and can easily accommodate 4K and 8K at high frame rates. And if you're comparing GPMI versus HDMI versus Thunderbolt versus DisplayPort, well, Thunderbolt 5 is 120 gigabytes per second and 240 watts compared to that 192 gigabytes per second and 480 watts. I'm excited for everyone to have GP in their name after the upcoming success of the F1 film with, of course, Apex GP. But yeah, what do you think?
This is cool to see some competition in this space. It seems like this connector has a lot of potential for some benefits over HDMI. I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle to overcome just the ubiquity of HDMI. And if I'm being completely selfish, I hope that they go with the Type-B connector because I don't need any more USB-C confusion in my life. I don't want to know, is this a cable for my TV or my computer? Or, who knows, maybe Macs will eventually adopt it. But I guess this could be a way around, we talk about the MacBook Pro not being able to get much thinner because of the HDMI port. This could be a way around that, which would be kind of cool. So we'll see. It's great to see this continuing to develop. Of course, HDMI, a standard that's been around for a long time and has continued to develop, but has developed kind of slowly in some ways. And, we continue to see updates there. But this has a lot of benefits as well. And yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a new connector coming to my TVs. I'm going to have to get a labeler, I think, for my cables if this ends up happening.
Yeah, 192 gigabytes per second, right? We've toyed with the idea of Apple Immersive Video maybe coming to a TV set that is almost like a stage-like situation. So you get that immersive feeling and, basically a step up from 3D. I'm guessing this standard would be able to accomplish that. So, we're in dreamland, of course, as we always are with me when it comes to screen technology. Let's get our feet firmly on the ground and talk about what is being removed, not added, to TVs this week.
Yeah, Flat Panels HD reports that Google Gemini will be removed from LG TVs starting on May 1st. This follows the removal of Google Gemini from Samsung TVs early last year. LG owners will still be able to use LG's ThinQ voice assistant for voice controls, though the feature set is more limited than that offered by Gemini. So this is interesting. Of course, Google's getting into their own TV thing with the Google TV device, which of course includes AI features. And it seems like some of these third-party integrations are being removed over time. I guess my question is how long until another GPT type assistant gets added to LG TVs? We got ChatGPT or some other company coming in maybe to replace it, or you think they're just going to stick with ThinQ?
Maybe this is out of order. Siri could come.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think that would make a lot of people very upset. Although I will say, my son is obsessed with Siri right now. He's discovered that Siri talks to you and does things for you, and he thinks that's just the best thing in the world. So Siri's got one new fan at least.
There we go. In terms of app news, Netflix has made its full list of over 30 languages available to viewers on televisions, an expansion of the feature already available on mobile and in browsers. Is this also coming to Apple TV? Because I swear I don't see a list of 30 languages.
I think this is supposed to be coming to all TV platforms, not just smart TVs. So based on the press release I read, it seems like this is like going to be a full part of their offering now, but it could be a slower rollout. So I haven't seen it on my Apple TV yet either, but of course we'll be looking out for it because that is incredible to offer that many language options for people to not only be able to watch things in the language they prefer and also have subtitles, but also Netflix talks about people learning new languages by watching Netflix content, which is really cool. It's like a nice alternative to Duolingo where you get to enjoy a TV show while you learn.
Yeah, and I think, I know at least a couple of friends that are addicted to the Korean output on Netflix, and so they're learning the language that way, which I know is something that was touted, of course, in the press release. That said, we talked last week about ASL coming to Macs, thanks to The Last of Us, once again, and I think that is the next step. Who can be the first to integrate ASL to all of their original content?
Now, if you're a fan of learning new things while you're watching TV and becoming a more educated person, this might be for you. Premium news streaming service CNBC Plus is now available on Apple TV. Subscribers can access their subscription, which includes a live stream of the CNBC channel and on-demand episodes of CNBC shows within the CNBC app on their Apple TVs. The service costs $14.99 a month or $149.99 per year and is available in the U.S. Personally, I don't need more live stream news on my TV, but if you're a news junkie, this is for you. And if you've been paying for this service and been wanting it on your Apple TV without having to use AirPlay or some other workaround, you'll be glad to know it's now available.
Devon, I'll check in with you in a couple of weeks. Things may have changed. Getting away from news. Sometimes we need to distract ourselves. Well, we've got plenty of reasons to do that. Announced this week, with more coming in May.
5 new games are coming to Apple Arcade on May 1st. It's our monthly batch of new games, and this is an exciting one because it's led by an Apple Arcade exclusive called What the Clash. It's a quirky one-on-one party game from the makers, of course, of What the Car, where players unlock modifier cards to get advantages over their opponents. Look at the screenshots for this in the App Store. It looks absolutely wild, so much fun. I love party games, and that social aspect of it, I think that's just amazing, being able to play. You can play against the computer, but being able to play against someone else, I think, is a lot of fun. And I'm interested to see what this card modifier system looks like and how you can use those to your advantage to just completely blindside people as you're playing. Apple Arcade will also include Lego Friends Heart Lake Rush Plus, Words of Wonders Search Plus, Sumi Sumi Matching Puzzle Plus, in addition to updates to Hello Kitty Island Adventure, PGA Tour Pro Golf, What the Car, and more. I think this is a really cool month for Apple Arcade. I'm excited to try these out. And I think the continuous addition of the What the Blank games to Apple Arcade is one of the strongest parts of the service. And I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, and please, despite Devon's pleading, do not sue us. Version 1.1 of the Apple TV app for Android was released this week, apparently, with a handful of additions: automatic captions when the device is muted, automatic captions when playback is skipped backwards, and an option to play a recommendation after finishing a film, sporting event, or series, alongside autoplaying of trailers in the top carousel, basically bringing Android into kind of parity with what we already have over on iOS. And, well, the parity continues. Apple Music on Windows now supporting Dolby Atmos playback, but with a catch. Users must install the Dolby Access app to enable the codec, and, well, just that sentence alone reminds me of darker days, Devon, before I had a Mac.
Let's talk about trailers. We got several new trailers this week for Apple Originals, including Jane, which is coming next Friday on April 18th, and Oneless Season 2, which is coming on April 25th. But for me, the most exciting trailer this week is a film that we've talked about many times here throughout its production. We finally got our first look at what it's going to be like, and that is Fountain of Youth. Two estranged siblings partner on a global heist to find the mythological Fountain of Youth. They must use their knowledge of history to follow clues on an epic adventure that will change their lives and possibly lead to immortality.
There's a power beyond any of our comprehension. One story. 5 continents. Over thousands of years.
We're looking for the Fountain of Youth.
Oh, please, no.
There's a reason the fountain was hidden.
You really think you're gonna find a magic pool of water?
Think you want to find out?
This trailer had all the duffs that any cinema fan in love with low frequencies could muster, Devon. Of course, the film's from Skydance Media. It's directed by Guy Ritchie, written by James Vanderbilt, and starring John Krasinski, Natalie Portman, Eliza Gonzalez, Domhnall Gleeson, Adrian Mayad, Laz Alonso, Carmen Eogo, and Stanley Tucci. Devon, did you enjoy the duffs? This gave me Indiana Jones vibes. You know, the good ones, minus the aliens.
I certainly did enjoy the duffs. And this, to me, a film that I loved growing up was National Treasure. And this gave me very much vibes of that. Maybe mixed a little bit with like The Mummy, minus the supernatural elements, I think, probably of The Mummy. But this looks like so much fun. This international adventure for something mythical that we've all heard about. Again, National Treasure kid, someone who is obsessed with that kind of like conspiracy theory kind of stuff, but not anything weird or dangerous or out there. Just like that historical things that could have been hidden, and the possibility that someone could find them. I think that's a lot of fun. And a great premise for just this adventure story that I think is going to be great for the whole family. I'm particularly happy to see John Krasinski leaning back into a more comedic role. I think this is maybe like halfway back between his action stuff that he's been doing and The Office. So it's like Jim from The Office, but with a beard and going out into the desert. And I'm here for that. So that's exciting to me. I think the whole cast is exciting, but just seeing him go for the laughs a little bit more, that was refreshing for me.
I mean, you have literally just opened my eyes to the fact I never put 2 and 2 together. Now I have. This looks fantastic with, I think, what sounds like a luscious score from Christopher Benstead. A little bit of a word of warning, though. Normally we link to the trailers on YouTube, to help Apple monetize their trailers and, get that advert revenue. But this time we're going to actually link to the listing in the TV app, because the YouTube video doesn't seem to be able to handle some of the panning shots too well in comparison. And so I think from a technical point of view, and maybe I'm just too much of a snob, that might put some people off. So very, very much looking forward to this. Fountain of Youth premieres globally Friday, May 23rd on Apple TV+. And again, the sound design, the score sounds amazing, and the film just looks awesome.
Another Apple original that I can't wait for, and I'm so excited that we got news about this week. We've been talking about the show for a while about whether or not it would come back. Now we know for sure that Trying will return for a 5th season on Apple TV+, with filming set to begin in London this July. Created by Andy Walton and starring Rafe Spall and Esther Smith, the hit British comedy follows Nikki, Jason, and friends as they deal with the joys and trials of parenthood. Sigmund, are you as excited as I am for a 5th season of Trying?
I am, and I'm just excited that we can actually mention it, because I think I kind of tried to hint, get it, at its renewal. The news has come out. I'm looking forward to an official announcement from Apple, because season 4 also got a bit of a quiet mention when it was renewed. And I think it's one of the best shows on the service, especially for families. And it's, I think, what we deemed in the past as a weepy, but a happy weepy. And cannot wait. Very, very excited for everyone involved in the production that will take place in July, alongside, of course, Ted Lasso happening at the same time. So busy time in London this July. Long Way Home is the latest motorcycle travel series starring Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, and it's going to premiere Friday, May 9th on Apple TV Plus, with the synopsis giving us some clues as to what to expect, with the guys travelling through the Netherlands and Germany to visit Charlie's mum's hometown before heading to the Danish islands. Very, very excited to see this series return once again. Of course, the bike road trip journey that began with normal bikes and then escalated to EVs. So not so much room, but more whoosh.
I'm looking forward to more of this. I loved Long Way Up, and I thought it was just a really great way to kind of explore the world, but also get some touching stories from these two guys who I really enjoyed getting to know, and I'm excited that we're going to get some more time with them in May. In development news, Juno Temple will star in Apple original series The Husbands from A24, lead writer Miriam Batty from Succession and Beef, lead director Craig Gillespie, who you'll know from I, Tonya and Your Friends and Neighbors, and executive producer Annie Martyr from The Guilty and Nobody. Based on the novel of the same name by Holly Gramazio, the 8-episode comedic drama follows Lauren, who returns home one night to be greeted by her husband Michael. There's only one problem. She's never seen this man before in her life. Before Lauren can wrap her mind around the situation, Michael disappears and is replaced by a new husband. Lauren realizes that her attic has created an infinite supply of husbands and is forced to confront the question, if swapping lives is as easy as changing a light bulb, how do you know you've taken the right path? Deadline reports that production for The Husbands is planned to begin in the late fall after Juno Temple finishes filming the 4th season of Ted Lasso this summer, which that contract is still in negotiation, at least as of this week, according to Deadline. So hopefully some news there as well. But sounds like we're going to get a lot of Juno Temple on Apple TV Plus very soon, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, really interesting concept. Multiple husbands, kind of a mix between Lion, Witch and Wardrobe and Sex and the City, but I'm sure with a different twist. Very interesting. Look forward to seeing how this one pans out. In other news, Vanity Fair published a first look this week at Murderbot, which we'll link in the show notes ahead of its May 14th premiere on Apple TV+. And Matt Bellamy has reported that Apple Services head Eddie Q, content co-chief Zach Van Amberg, and film head Matt Dentler attended last week's CinemaCon to meet with top theatre executives. They reportedly committed to producing more than 10 Apple original films per year, though without any firm commitments regarding theatrical releases. Bellamy described executives' reactions as cautiously encouraged. During CinemaCon, Apple and Warner Brothers shared the first 10 minutes of F1 to rave reviews, calling it visually stunning, gritty, and exciting, as well as intense, with entertainment reporter Scott Mantz saying it looks like producer Jerry Bruckheimer and director Joseph Kosinski have another huge hit opening this June. Think Top Gun Maverick on wheels. And, well, talking of Top Gun, Tom Cruise, who was also at CinemaCon to show the first footage from his upcoming Mission Impossible movie, said he'd be at the opening weekend of Brad Pitt's F1 because he's a really good driver. Cruise revealed that he and Pitt would race go-karts during downtime on the Interview with a Vampire set. And, well, this isn't the first time Tom Cruise has encouraged people to go to the cinema and really promoted competitive, competing pictures. Oppenheimer and Barbie was the last time that I really remember him speaking out, which of course, came out the same summer as his Mission Impossible film, which was incredible. Cannot wait to see the second part of that, starring, of course, Tremel Tillman of Severance. So very, very excited all the way round. And for those that are unaware, CinemaCon, the world's largest and most important gathering for the motion picture theatre industry, serving as the official convention of the National Association of Theatre Owners, with, of course, theatres seeing an 11% drop compared to last year, up until last week's release of the Minecraft movie. And, you know, movies. We make movies. Well, it works. Theatre owners are, of course, banking on F1 to accelerate the box office and get it out of reverse. And, well, I'm very, very much looking forward to this film after all of these wonderful early reviews of that first 10 minutes, which I believe featured Daytona cars.
Very cool to hear. So much excitement for F1 coming out of CinemaCon, including those kind words from Tom Cruise. I, too, can't wait to see it, and I really hope it is a big boost for the theaters this summer. I'll certainly be sitting in the theater watching it at least once, hopefully more than once. And yeah, it's great to see Apple continue to be involved with theater owners and talking with them. We want to see their presence there, and so we hope to see some announcements about the upcoming slate of Apple Original films in theaters very soon. Some more good news for Apple Original Films continues this week with data from Real Good showing that Apple are by far and away the leaders of the pack when it comes to the streamer with the most popular movies compared to the overall average across all platforms. With popularity scores based on real viewing behavior from millions of viewers. Prime Video's at -2% compared to the average, Peacock at -1%, Disney Plus at positive 0.5%, Netflix and Max at 1.5%, Hulu and Paramount Plus at just over 2%, and Apple leading at a staggering 8%. If that sounds like a big lead, it is. You sent me the chart today, Sigmund, and it's just astounding to see how well these Apple Original Films are doing on streaming. I think it just speaks to the slate that Apple has lined up recently and the way it really is connecting with audiences.
Yeah, and now it's just a case of getting it to convert from streaming back to the cinema. And I think if Minecraft movie is anything to go by, you know, this is an experience that it's at least young people are starting to appreciate again. You know, going into a theatre and seeing something on a big screen with big sound and away from their phones. Very, very, very cool. Now, when it comes to streaming and TV, according to the latest report from Just Watch, Apple TV Plus gained 1% of streaming market share in the US in the first quarter of this year, growing from 7% to 8%. The service continues to rank 6th in Just Watch's list, after Prime Video at 21%, Netflix at 20%, Max at 13%, Disney Plus at 12%, and Hulu at 10%, with Paramount trailing at 7%, and both Peacock and Stars at the bottom of the list at 2% each. So interesting to see Apple TV Plus gaining now. They overtook Paramount Plus a little while back, but now gaining on Hulu. And I also thought it was interesting that Prime Video are ahead of Netflix. And I wonder if that is the streaming platform and whether or not channels have something of an effect on that, including Apple TV Plus. But we don't know for sure.
Yeah, some interesting stuff happening at the top of that chart with Prime Video and Netflix always kind of swapping. And then right where Apple is at, it's interesting to see if Apple will eventually be within shooting distance of Hulu, which I think if we'd have talked about that 5 years ago, that would have seemed impossible at this point. So very cool to see. We've talked a lot recently about the cost of Apple TV Plus for Apple, kind of why they're investing in it, what the benefit of it is. And one aspect of that was covered this week at a new SERP report is actually who is subscribing to Apple TV Plus and what that audience looks like and that audience's value to Apple outside of just the streaming service. So data from 2024, according to SERP, shows that Apple TV Plus subscribers own more Apple products than non-subscribers, which is a really interesting fact. 1 out of 3 customers who purchased a new device from Apple had Apple TV Plus. Half of Apple TV Plus subscribers owned an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac, compared to just 1/3 of non-TV Plus subscribers. And only 13% of Apple TV Plus subscribers only owned a single Apple product. So it's very interesting to see that Apple TV Plus, the audience base, is also very valuable to Apple in terms of the hardware that they're owning, not just the continued subscription for Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, one detail we don't know is how many Apple TV Plus subscribers own an Apple TV. That's the important stuff left out of this report. Finally, the Hollywood Reporter has shared exclusive details and photos of Apple's Think Apple TV Plus FYC house, which will be set up inside the Hollywood Athletic Club from April 24th to May 21st. There, the company will host Emmy voters for screenings, panels, and exhibitions for the slate of Apple originals in contention for Emmy Awards this year. They include Severance, The Studio, Shrinking, Disclaimer, and many more. The exhibit will include costume displays, photo opportunities, live on-set drawings created on the iPad by New Yorker cartoonist and writer Liza Donnelly, and a shot an iPhone portrait studio, as well as a recreation of Lumen's severed floor. More details and photos of the house are linked in the show notes, and Apple, we're waiting on an invitation.
I'll be checking my email.
Well, ahead of our releases this week, a quick namaste to our Indian listeners joining us since Apple TV Plus joined Prime Video as an add-on in the region. And, well, you've got a lot to join us with. Today, of course, being the finale of Berlin ER, alongside a new episode of The Studio, The Missing Reel, which is a very, very interesting one. I'm looking forward to people checking it out and seeing what their thoughts are with this. A bit of a crime caper, kind of like old schooly detective vibe to this one. On Friday, we see the premiere of our highlight for this week, Your Friends and Neighbours, and the finale to Surface, which was described earlier this week by a loved one as an Australian drama called Surfing, and a new episode of Dope Thief. Friday Night Baseball sees Pittsburgh Pirates at Cincinnati Reds at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by Detroit Tigers and Minnesota Twins at 8 p.m. Eastern. And on Saturday and Sunday sees the return of MLS Game Day on MLS Season Pass, alongside Sunday Night Soccer, which is available to all. And for those that aren't yet on MLS Season Pass, Messi, the Lionel Messi, is gifting everyone a free month of MLS Season Pass, and that gift is linked in the show notes of this very podcast. Monday sees the return of Big Time, the Apple original podcast that is coming out week by week for everyone but Apple TV Plus subscribers. Get each episode a week early. And if that wasn't enough, we've got a bunch of extras for you.
Yes, Severance keeps on giving this week inside the Lumen event at Bell Works. This event looked like so much fun, transforming the actual building where they shoot the series into, of course, the severed floor, showing off so many aspects of the building, and a Q&A with the cast and creators as well. A huge crowd there. I didn't even hear about this until the day of, so I'm not exactly sure how everyone got their invites, but it looked like a ton of fun. And the video is well worth checking out if you, like me, weren't able to attend the event itself. We've also got the blooper reel for Season 4 of Mythic Quest. Don't miss that. For Dope Thief, Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Moura play Dope or Nope. Bear Brick shared a sing and dance along compilation this week, so if your little ones are loving the music, that's a great thing to put on and let them sing and dance along. And there was more F1 movie behind the scenes ahead of its theatrical release in June. We love all the details of what's going on with that film, how they made it. It's just really fascinating, the whole process, and we'll link that in the show notes for you to check out as well.
Very, very cool. Lots and lots to watch across Apple TV originals this week. But last week, we saw the debut of a new Apple immersive video series called VIP. Its debut episode centered on Yankee Stadium, where we experienced one of the cathedrals of sport with a behind-the-scenes look at how elite athletes, dedicated staff, die-hard fans, and unforgettable moments make the world's most iconic venues come alive. The latest Apple immersive video release, the start of a new series, and the end to, I think, what was probably a painful couple of weeks releases for Yankees fans at the start of the baseball season. Not being a Yankee fan, I'm guessing you enjoyed this, so what did you think?
Yeah, I loved it a lot. I've never been to Yankee Stadium. Last time I was in New York, I was hoping to go, but the only game that was happening while I was there was on the day I flew in. I didn't want to risk not making it out there. So I've yet to attend a Yankees game, but it is on my list of things to do and list of places I want to go to. So I enjoyed this episode a lot. I thought it was a great tour and overview of what it's like to be there, and I had a lot of fun with it. What did you think?
Let's stick with the positive.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot positive here. To me, it really came away as a celebration of those working hard behind the scenes to make game day magical for attendees, including the grounds crew, attendants, and merchandise sellers. I think we got a glimpse into the stadium in a way that a lot of people don't, just in the sense of the seats were empty, and you got to see them working to make it all pristine and nice. I've never thought, Sigmund, that this is just a blind spot in my worldview, I guess. I've never thought how they keep the seats clean for all those thousands of people. But you get a glimpse of someone going through and cleaning the seats, and you get to see what that looks like. And it's like, well, I've just never thought. I go sit down, it's clean, whatever. But it's kind of an invitation to think about it as this living, breathing thing with really these heroes who make this experience amazing for so many people every day. So I thought that was a really cool aspect of it, that they chose to use this time to highlight those people, in addition to, of course, the players and the fans and all that as well. An element of this that I at least haven't noticed in Apple Immersive Video before that I thought was super cool was the integration of 2D archival footage into modern immersive shots. So you're looking at this 3D portrayal of Yankee Stadium, but in the midst of it, they're overlaying 2D archival footage that, of course, they can't show in 3D because it was shot, decades ago, because they're talking about the history of the Yankees. And I thought it was integrated really well and smoothly, and it looked great. Of course, it looks like it's from a different era, but that gives you a fun vibe as well. And I thought the blending of the old and the new was a cool innovation for this one, and I hope they continue with that for this series. And then the shots that I particularly enjoyed were the shots from the ground of the stadium, literally the camera like on the grass. There were several of those, and I thought that really gave a sense of the scale of the stadium. Like, it felt like you were just laying on the grass looking up, and it gave you an idea of how huge it is. Of course, when you're in it, it feels huge, but down from the bottom, you just really feel small when you're there. And I thought that was super effective and a fun way to do it. I think Apple Immersive Video does really cool things with scale, and this one really worked for me.
Yeah, I agree with you with regard to the transition from old-timey to modern. I really loved the transition outside of the stadium before that 2D montage at the center, like almost the chapel part of the stadium. But technically, personally, I wasn't a fan of where the majority of shots were placed. Unlike the Metallica experience that we had, where I felt like I could look everywhere, and I've watched that 5 times and I still find things that are new. This, I felt like my eyes were gazing continuously beyond the 180-degree frame, and that then found me constantly breaking immersion. And I don't think my immersion's been broken that much for any Apple Immersive Video. The edit also, early on, I didn't think was particularly suited to 180-degree video. That said, the edit pace started to slow down once the action picked up and we got more time with the athletes. And whilst narratively speaking, I think it's great to be able to show off the people that make this stadium live and breathe and run. It didn't really grab my attention as an opener. I would have liked to have seen a better kind of to and fro between the action, the fans, and everything leading up, so that maybe we see the action and the fans reacting, and then that particular area of the pitch being worked on during the day. Nice introduction to the series. Maybe I would be having completely different thoughts narratively if this was on Old Trafford, at Manchester United, whose stadium is going to be pulled down soon and replaced. And I'd love it if Old Trafford was highlighted. So anyone in charge of this series, please make that happen. But yeah, overall, cool.
I can see what you're saying about especially the opening sequence. There was actually quite a bit of time we spent outside the stadium before it went in. And there was also, I felt like, a little bit of an odd balance between the Dodgers and the Yankees. They actually spent more time with the Dodgers than the Yankees and Dodgers fans as well. And I wasn't totally sure exactly why that was, maybe just access and contracts or whatever. But I did also want to shout out the narration from Joe Buck, who I thought did a really good job. Sports documentaries are a well-established medium. They have a vibe, and I feel like it would have been really easy to slip into maybe too energetic with this. And I thought he did a really good job of keeping it pretty mellow, not slow or boring, but just keeping it calm and not too in your face until we got to the really exciting parts about the game and all that. So I thought that was really well done, and I enjoyed his voice. I'll be interested to see who they get to narrate as they go from place to place, how they pick the voices out and how they handle that. But I thought the narration in this one was really well done, and the whole thing I enjoyed, and I'm excited to see where they go next. VIP Yankee Stadium is available now on Apple Vision Pro. Let's talk some TV app highlights, Sigmund. What's going on in the world of TV and film this week that we can watch at home?
Well, I feel bad because we're going to have to recap a couple of things that I've missed in previous weeks. I don't know how these have flown under my radar, but two incredible picks. The first is The Bondsman on Prime Video. It's Kevin Bacon as a murdered bounty hunter back from the dead after being resurrected by the devil to trap and send back demons that have escaped from the prison of hell by chasing them down. And whilst doing so, he learns how his own sins got his soul condemned in the first place. And it is brilliant, which is a rare thing to say for a Prime Video series, but really, I love this. Very, very cool. Something completely different, though, for someone that is still kind of reeling from the fact that Frasier has finished and won't be renewed. Mid-century modern kind of takes its place for me. It stars Nathan Lane, Matt Bomer, and Nathan Lee Graham, and includes the final on-screen appearance of Linda Lavin. It's about three best friends, gay gentlemen of a certain age, who decide to spend their golden years living together in Palm Springs. It's kind of been lazily compared to the Golden Girls, but the studio comedy isn't quite at that level. But it did deliver a chuckle when I needed it the most this past week, and comes recommended. It's on Disney+. Also this week, Mickey 17 finally released after a last-minute delay the last time I recommended it. So it is now in the TV app. Bong Joon-ho directed, starring Robert Pattinson, and it is a high recommend. We've also got the debut of Mobile Suit Gundam GQUUUUX Season 1 on Prime Video. It looks very cool. On Thursday, we see Black Mirror Season 7 on Netflix, alongside the return of the animated Gremlins The Wild Batch Part 2 on Max. And on Tuesday, we've got two big PVOD releases, both of which previous Up Next picks of yours, Devon, Captain America Brave New World and The Day the Earth Blew Up, both coming to PVOD in the Apple TV app. And you can find links to all of that and more in the show notes. Max is having a bit of a week this week, Devon, and my Up Next pick this week is the return of Hacks, with its 4th season. This is a show that I recommend every season it comes around. It's about a strange mentorship that develops when a legendary comedian struggling to hold on to her dwindling empire hires a young unemployed writer to liven up her material. It stars Jean Smart and Hannah Einbinder as Deborah and Ava, and it's absolutely stunning and hilarious and heartfelt television. The show's highs come from their frictionless but functional relationship, and I genuinely can't get enough. All 3 seasons are now available on Max, with its 4th season debuting later this week. And, well, it's one reason why I've kept my Max subscription, but your up next pick is a reason why I've also possibly upgraded for Atmos.
I knew it was coming eventually, Sigmund, and I'm proud of you for admitting it in front of us all. But totally makes sense because this pick has been a pick on the show before, and we mentioned its audio. That, of course, is the return of The Last of Us for Season 2 this Sunday on Max. Come for the post-apocalyptic zombie story. Stay to watch Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey as the most strange but touching parent-child pair I've ever seen. And of course, they're not actually related, but that's part of the story of watching them kind of come together, that protective aspect of the relationship, and how it's going to be tested in Season 2. Those who watch Season 1 know there's some things coming up. I have not played the video game series that this show is based on. I've heard many things about how great it is, and of course this adaptation, just took the world by storm when it came out back in 2023. So I'm really excited to get back into this world. From what little I've heard about Season 2, I think the pace is going to slow down a little bit from what I've been told, which I'm actually excited about because I think it's going to give them some opportunities to explore more of the world a little bit. And I'm really looking forward to see what they have for us in Season 2, because Season 1 was just so great. And again, that kicks off this Sunday, and you'll be able to watch in ASL as the episodes are rolling out, which is incredible and another reason to support Max in this endeavor.
Yeah, highly recommend. Very, very much looking forward to the series, but also your hot takes, Devon, as someone that hasn't played the second game. I think there's going to be plenty of them. Well, that is the end of our episode this week. Once again, a big thank you to Rogue Amoeba for supporting this podcast and the Mac Stories Podcast Network this week. And a big thank you to you, dear listener, for listening to us ramble on about Apple TV and everything in between. You can, of course, contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net, along with your audio messages. Just keep them under 30 seconds, and we'll be sure to play them.
We'll be back next week with the premiere of Government Cheese and a deep dive into Surface Season 2. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.